In the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, there exists a truth that terrifies even the most advanced species: humans don't break the way they're supposed to. When the Zephyrian Empire conquered its 1000th world, they thought they understood all forms of life. When they enslaved their 10,000th species, they believed they had seen every possible response to domination. But they had never encountered a species that grew stronger under pressure, that turned pain into fuel, that transformed desperation into an unbreakable weapon. They had never met humanity. Now, in the blood-soaked arena of Empress Vexaria, where the strongest warriors from across the galaxy are forced to fight for the entertainment of their alien overlords, something unprecedented is about to happen. A human slave, broken in body but not in spirit, will catch the eye of the most powerful being in known space. What starts as cruel amusement will become the catalyst for a revolution that will shake the very foundations of galactic civilization. Because when humans are pushed to their absolute limit, when everything they love is stripped away, when death seems like the only escape, that's when they become truly dangerous. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a maintenance worker from Earth who never wanted to be a hero, and how an impossible choice in an alien arena would ignite a fire that would burn across the stars. The galaxy thinks it knows what humans are capable of. The galaxy is wrong. The chains around Marcus Chen's wrists had worn grooves into his skin so deep that they no longer bled. 3 years of captivity aboard the Zephyrian slave ship had taught him that bleeding was a luxury his body could no longer afford. He sat in the cramped holding cell, surrounded by creatures from dozens of different worlds, all sharing the same hollow look of beings who had given up hope. The ship's hull groaned around them as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Marcus felt his stomach lurch with the familiar sensation of artificial gravity reasserting itself. Through the single porthole in their cell, he could see the massive structure that had become the stuff of nightmares for every enslaved being in the galaxy, the Colosseum of Vexaria, a moon-sized arena where the Zephyrian Empire showcased its dominance over the conquered races. Marcus had been a maintenance engineer on the mining station Kepler 442b when the Zephyrians came. He remembered the day clearly, not because it was particularly horrific, the Zephyrians were efficient conquerors, swift and clean, but because it was the last day he had felt human. That was before he learned what it meant to be property, before he understood that his species' reputation for stubbornness was seen as entertaining by their captors. The cell door hissed open, and a Zephyrian guard stepped through. 7 feet tall with chitinous gray skin and, for arms, the alien moved with predatory grace. Its multifaceted eye swept across the prisoners before settling on Marcus. Human, it spoke in the universal translator's monotone voice. You fight today. Marcus looked up slowly, meeting the creature's gaze without flinching. The small act of defiance had become his ritual, his way of holding on to the last fragments of his dignity. The guard's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Good, the guard said. The Empress enjoys the ones who still have spirit. It makes the breaking more entertaining. The guard grabbed Marcus by the arm with one of its secondary limbs and hauled him to his feet. As they walked through the ship's corridors toward the transport bay, Marcus caught glimpses of other prisoners being prepared for the arena. Some were massive creatures built for combat, 6-armed Vorgons with their natural armor plating, crystalline Etherians whose bodies could shift between solid and energy states. Others were clearly not fighters but had been selected for the crowd's cruel entertainment. The transport shuttle was cramped and stank of fearsweat from a dozen different species. Marcus found himself pressed between a trembling Calarian, a species that looked like a cross between a deer and a praying mantis, and a stoic Drachmary whose reptilian features betrayed no emotion. The Drachmary caught Marcus looking and spoke in a low hiss that the translator barely caught. First time in the arena? Marcus shook his head. Third. The Drachmary's scaled eyebrows rose slightly. Impressive. Most don't survive their second match. What's your record? 2 wins, Marcus said quietly. He didn't mention that his victories had come from pure luck and his opponent's overconfidence rather than any fighting skill. The Empress must find you amusing, the Drachmary observed. I am Korthak. I have fought 17 times. Marcus. And 17 times means you're either very good or very lucky. Both, Korthak replied with what might have been a grim smile. Though today I suspect my luck runs out. Word is they're bringing out something special for the Empress's entertainment. The shuttle shuddered as it docked with the Colosseum, and Marcus felt his heart rate increase despite his attempts to stay calm. He had learned to manage his fear over the years, to channel it into the cold focus that had kept him alive when everyone expected him to die. But, as the doors opened and the roar of the crowd hit them like a physical wave, that familiar terror crept back into his chest. The holding area beneath the arena floor was a maze of cells and preparation chambers. Guards herded the new arrivals into different sections based on the day's scheduled matches. Marcus found himself separated from Korthak and the others, led to a smaller chamber where a Zephyrian technician was waiting with what looked like medical equipment. Standard pre-fight examination, the technician explained as it began running scanners over Marcus's body. The Empress likes her entertainment to last as long as possible. The scans revealed what Marcus already knew: he was malnourished, showing signs of chronic stress, and had poorly healed injuries from his previous fights. But the technician also noted something that made its mandibles click with interest. Unusual neural activity, it muttered to itself. Elevated stress response, but cognitive function actually improving under pressure. Fascinating. The Empress will want to see this data. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, another guard arrived to escort him to the pre-arena staging area. This was where fighters waited for their turn, where they could hear the crowd's reactions to the ongoing matches. Marcus had learned to read the sounds, the collective gasp that meant someone had been seriously injured, the bloodthirsty roar that accompanied a death, the disappointed groan when a match ended too quickly. He was given basic leather armor and a simple sword, standard equipment for what the Zephyrians called entertainment matches, fights where the outcome mattered less than the spectacle. As he strapped on the armor, Marcus tried to empty his mind of everything except the basics of survival he had learned in his previous fights. Keep moving. Look for openings. Don't let fear make you stupid. A massive cheer erupted from above, followed by the announcer's voice echoing through the staging area. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all forms. Today we have a special treat for our beloved Empress Vexaria. In honor of her 1000th year of glorious rule, we present a match that will test the very limits of survival instinct. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Special matches usually meant they were planning something particularly cruel. In the blue corner, we have Thraxon the Unstoppable, champion gladiator of the Outer Rim, slayer of over 50 opponents, enhanced with the finest cybernetic implants our technology can provide. The crowd's roar was deafening. Marcus had heard of Thraxon, a Vorgani warrior who had been turned into a killing machine through surgical enhancement. No one had ever survived more than 5 minutes against him. And, in the red corner, representing the species that dares to call itself the dominant lifeform of a small blue world, the human Marcus-Chen. The weight of inevitability settled on Marcus's shoulders like a lead blanket. This wasn't meant to be a fight. It was meant to be an execution, a demonstration of humanity's insignificance before the might of the Zephyrian Empire. The staging area door began to rise, revealing the arena floor beyond. Sunlight streamed in from the open ceiling high above, where the Empress's viewing box was clearly visible. Even from this distance, Marcus could see her, a figure in gleaming armor surrounded by lesser Zephyrian nobles, all waiting to watch him die. As he stepped onto the arena floor, the noise of the crowd hit him like a wall of sound. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had come to witness this spectacle. In the center of the arena, Thraxon was waiting. The creature had once been a normal Vorgani, but now it was something else entirely. Its 6 arms had been replaced with mechanical appendages ending in various weapons, blades, spikes, and what looked like energy projectors. Its natural armor had been supplemented with metal plating that gleamed in the sunlight. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. Warriors, you may begin when the signal sounds. Remember, there is no victory in surrender, only death or glory. Marcus raised his simple sword, the weapon feeling pathetically inadequate in his hands. Around him, the crowd was chanting for blood, their voices blending into an inhuman roar. In the Empress's box, he could see movement as the royal party leaned forward in anticipation. Then, the signal sounded, and Thraxon began to move. The cyborg warrior was faster than anything that Psi should have been able to move. It closed the distance between them in 2 massive strides, all 6 weapon arms moving in a deadly dance designed to overwhelm its opponent. Marcus threw himself to the side, feeling the wind from a blade pass inches from his head. He rolled, came up running, and immediately had to dodge again as Thraxon's energy weapons sent bolts of superheated plasma scorching the arena floor where he had been standing. The crowd was cheering, but Marcus couldn't afford to listen. All of his focus had narrowed to the simple task of staying alive for the next few seconds. Thraxon was methodical, efficient, designed to kill quickly and spectacularly. But there was something Marcus had learned in his years of captivity, something the Zephyrians hadn't accounted for when they programmed their perfect killing machine. Humans didn't fight the way other species did. They didn't follow the logical patterns of engagement that could be predicted and countered. When faced with impossible odds, humans did impossible things. Marcus feinted left, then dove right, using Thraxon's own momentum against it as the creature overextended in its attack. For just a moment, the cyborg's back was exposed, and Marcus drove his sword between 2 armor plates with all the strength he could muster. The blade barely penetrated, but it was enough to draw a thin line of blue blood. The crowd fell silent for a moment, shocked that the human had managed to land any blow at all. Thraxon spun around, its mechanical face showing what might have been surprise. Then, it let out a sound that was part roar, part electronic screech, and its attack pattern changed. No longer methodical and efficient, it began attacking with rage, with the desire not just to kill but to utterly destroy its opponent. This was what Marcus had been counting on. Rage made even perfect killing machines make mistakes. He stayed just ahead of the creature's fury, leading it in a circle around the arena floor, using every piece of debris and every slight imperfection in the ground to his advantage. His sword was too small to do real damage, but he didn't need to win this fight, he just needed to survive it long enough to show the galaxy something important. As Thraxon's attacks grew more frenzied, Marcus began to notice something in the crowd. The cheering had changed, become less certain. In the nobles section, he could see beings leaning forward, their expressions shifting from bored anticipation to genuine interest. And, in the Empress's box, a figure in gleaming armor had risen from her throne. Empress Vexaria was watching him personally now, her multifaceted eyes tracking his every movement with an intensity that seemed to cut through the chaos of the arena. For a moment, their gazes met across the vast space, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years of captivity: recognition. Not as a slave, not as entertainment, but as something worthy of attention. That moment of distraction nearly killed him. Thraxon's blade passed so close to his throat that it drew blood, and the crowd erupted in anticipation of the death blow. But Marcus used the near miss to get inside the creature's guard, too close for its long-range weapons to be effective. Up close, he could see the join lines where flesh met machine, the places where Thraxon's original body had been butchered and rebuilt. He struck at these weak points, not with the desperate flailing of a dying animal, but with the calculated precision of someone who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something you never thought you could be. His sword found gaps in the armor, joints between mechanical parts, the soft tissue that the surgeons had been forced to leave intact to maintain the creature's biological functions. Each cut was small, but together they began to matter. Blue blood stained the arena floor, and, for the first time since the match began, Thraxon began to slow down. The crowd was no longer cheering for a quick execution. They were watching something unprecedented, a human not just surviving against impossible odds, but actually fighting back effectively. In 3 years of gladiatorial combat on Vexaria, no one had ever made Thraxon bleed this much. Marcus could feel exhaustion creeping into his muscles, but he could also feel something else, a strange clarity, as if the extremity of his situation had burned away everything non-essential and left only the pure will to survive. This was what the Zephyrians didn't understand about humans. They broke other species with fear and pain, but humans had evolved on a world where survival meant enduring the impossible. Thraxon made one final, desperate attack, bringing all 6 weapon arms together in a strike designed to crush Marcus utterly. But the human was no longer where the cyborg expected him to be. Marcus had thrown himself forward, under the attack, his sword aimed at the one spot he had identified as truly vulnerable, the neural interface where machine components connected directly to Thraxon's brain. The blade slid home with a sound like breaking glass, and every mechanical component in Thraxon's body went dead at once. The massive creature toppled backward, its natural body still alive but its weapons systems completely offline. The arena fell silent. In all the years of gladiatorial combat, no one had ever seen anything like this. A human slave, given basic equipment and expected to die in minutes, had not just survived but had defeated the Empire's most celebrated gladiator. Marcus stood over Thraxon's paralyzed form, breathing hard, his simple sword still humming with residual energy from the neural interface. Around him, thousands of beings sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Then, from the Empress's box, came the sound of slow applause. Vexaria was clapping, her armored hands creating a rhythmic metallic sound that echoed across the arena. As her applause continued, the crowd gradually joined in, their cheers taking on a different quality than before. They were no longer cheering for an execution. They were cheering for a warrior. Marcus looked up at the Empress's box and saw her standing at the edge of her balcony, her imposing figure silhouetted against the sky. Even at this distance, he could feel the weight of her attention, the sense that something fundamental had just changed. He had survived the impossible. But, as guards began to move onto the arena floor to escort him back to the holding cells, Marcus realized that his victory might have just made his situation infinitely more complicated. The Empress of the Zephyrian Empire was interested in him now, and, in his experience, the attention of powerful beings was rarely a blessing. As he was led from the arena floor, the crowd's cheers following him into the tunnels below, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his real test was just beginning. The holding cell they placed Marcus in after his victory was different from the communal pens where slaves usually waited between fights. This one was larger, cleaner, and, most unnervingly, it was designed for a single occupant. The walls were made of some kind of energy-resistant metal that hummed with a low vibration, and there was an actual bed instead of just a pile of straw. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, examining his wounds. The medical technicians had treated him after the fight, healing the worst of his injuries with Zephyrian technology that was decades ahead of anything humans had developed. His cuts were sealed, his bruises faded, and his strength was already returning. But the most significant change wasn't physical, it was the way the guards looked at him now. Where once they had seen him as just another piece of disposable entertainment, now there was something else in their multifaceted eyes. Wariness, perhaps. Or respect. Marcus wasn't sure which possibility disturbed him more. The cell door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see a figure he didn't recognize entering. Unlike the guards, this Zephyrian was smaller, more delicately built, with intricate patterns etched into its chitinous skin that suggested high rank. It wore robes instead of armor, and its movements had the careful precision of someone accustomed to navigating palace intrigue. Marcus Chen of Earth, the visitor said, its voice carrying none of the mechanical translation quality he was used to. This one spoke human languages fluently. I am Coordinator Vex Tan, Senior Advisor to Her Imperial Majesty. The Empress wishes to speak with you. Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing. In 3 years of captivity, he had never heard of a slave being personally summoned by the Empress. It was unprecedented, and, in his experience, unprecedented usually meant dangerous. When, he asked. Now, Vextan replied. But, first, you will be prepared. The preparation turned out to be more extensive than Marcus had expected. He was escorted to chambers that were clearly designed for much more important prisoners than arena fighters. Servants, themselves slaves from various conquered species, bathed him, dressed him in clothes that actually fit, and even offered him real food instead of the nutritional paste that was standard slave fare. As he ate, Marcus tried to make sense of his situation. The Empress's interest could mean several things, none of them particularly good for his long-term survival. She might want to study him, to understand how a human had managed to defeat Thraxon. She might want to use him as a propaganda tool, a demonstration of imperial power that could turn even the most stubborn species into entertaining pets. Or she might simply want to kill him herself, as a personal amusement. Vextan returned as Marcus finished his meal. Come, the advisor said. Her Majesty does not like to be kept waiting. The journey through the Colosseum's interior was a revelation. Marcus had only ever seen the holding cells and the arena itself, but now he was being led through corridors that spoke of immense wealth and power. The walls were lined with trophies from conquered worlds, artifacts, weapons, and preserved specimens from thousands of different species. It was a museum of imperial conquest, and every piece told the story of some civilization that had thought itself safe until the Zephyrian fleets appeared in their skies. They passed through several security checkpoints, each one staffed by guards whose equipment and bearing suggested they were elite troops rather than common soldiers. Marcus noted that his escort was growing larger as they went deeper into the complex, as if his mere presence required increasingly substantial security measures. Finally, they reached a set of doors that were clearly the entrance to the Imperial quarters. These were 20 feet tall and made from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As they approached, the doors began to open silently, revealing the chambers beyond. The Empress's private audience hall was vast and intimidating in its simplicity. The ceiling arched high overhead, supported by pillars that had been carved from single pieces of what looked like crystallized starlight. The floor was a mirror-smooth surface that reflected everything perfectly, creating the illusion that visitors were walking on empty space. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, sat a throne that seemed to have been grown rather than built, its organic curves suggesting it was made from some kind of living metal. And, on that throne sat Empress Vexaria herself. Marcus had seen her from a distance in the arena, but, up close, the full weight of her presence was overwhelming. She was larger than the other Zephyrians he had encountered, nearly 8 feet tall, and her chitinous armor seemed to be an actual part of her body rather than something she wore. Her forearms were graceful despite their obvious strength, and her multifaceted eyes tracked his approach with predatory intensity. But it wasn't her physical presence that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat, it was the sense of intelligence behind those alien eyes. This wasn't just a ruler or a warrior, this was a being of immense mental power, someone who had built and maintained an interstellar empire through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. "Approach," her voice commanded, and Marcus found himself walking forward before he had consciously decided to obey. The Empress's voice was different from other Zephyrians, deeper, more resonant, with harmonics that seemed to vibrate through his bones. He stopped at what seemed like a respectful distance, but Vexaria gestured for him to come closer. "Nearer," she said. "I would see the face of the being who accomplished the impossible." Marcus walked until he stood at the base of the platform, close enough to see the details of her alien features. Her eyes, he realized, weren't just multifaceted, they were actually compound organs that could focus on multiple objects simultaneously. Right now, all of that attention was focused on him. "Marcus Chen," the Empress said, and, hearing his name and her voice sent an odd shiver down his spine. "Born on Earth, trained as an engineer, captured during the pacification of Kepler 442b. 3 years in captivity, 2 previous arena victories, and now the only being in recorded history to defeat Thraxon in single combat." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving his face. "Tell me, human, how does it feel to be unique?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had expected interrogation, threats, perhaps some form of psychological manipulation. But this seemed like a genuine inquiry, as if the Empress truly wanted to understand his perspective. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Unique seems like the wrong word for someone who's still a slave." Vexaria's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Direct. I appreciate that quality. Most beings in your position would be trying to flatter me or beg for mercy. Would it help?" "No," she said immediately. "But it would tell me that you were ordinary, like the countless others who have knelt before this throne. You, however, appear to be something different." She stood, her movements fluid despite her size, and began to pace around him. Marcus forced himself to remain still, though every instinct told him to turn and keep her in sight. Showing fear now would be fatal. "Do you know what fascinates me most about your species?" Vexaria asked as she circled him. "It's not your technology, that's primitive compared to ours. It's not your physical capabilities, dozens of species are stronger, faster, more resilient. It's your psychological response to extreme stress." She completed her circuit and stood in front of him again, her forearms clasped behind her back in a gesture that was almost human in its familiarity. Most intelligent species, when faced with overwhelming force, respond predictably. They surrender, they negotiate, they adapt their behavior to minimize harm. This is rational. This is how civilized beings behave. Her head tilted slightly. Humans do none of these things. Marcus waited for her to continue, sensing that this conversation was heading somewhere important. When faced with impossible odds, when every rational analysis suggests that resistance is futile, humans become more dangerous, not less. You don't break the way you're supposed to break. This quality has made your species interesting to observe. Observe? Marcus asked. Did you think your planet was conquered on a whim? Vexaria's compound eyes seemed to glitter with amusement. Earth has been under surveillance for over 2 centuries. We wanted to understand what made humans so unusual before we decided how to handle your integration into the Empire. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Everything, the invasion, the enslavement, his own capture, had been planned, studied, orchestrated as part of some vast experiment. You're using us as test subjects, he said, and couldn't keep the disgust out of his voice. I'm learning from you, Vexaria corrected. There's a difference. And, today, you taught me something particularly interesting. She returned to her throne and settled into it with liquid grace. Thraxon was not just a gladiator. He was a prototype, the first of a new generation of warriors designed to be perfect killing machines. His defeat should have been impossible, even for the most skilled fighters in the galaxy. Marcus began to understand where this was leading, and the realization filled him with cold dread. But, you didn't defeat him through superior skill or strength, the Empress continued. You defeated him by refusing to accept that defeat was inevitable. Even when every logical analysis suggested you should surrender, you continued to fight. More than that, you found a way to turn your weakness into strength. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost like a whisper. I have ruled this empire for 1,000 years, Marcus Chen. I have conquered 10,000 worlds and broken the will of 1,000,000 species. But I have never encountered anything quite like human determination. What do you want from me? Marcus asked directly. Vexaria smiled, an expression that was deeply unsettling on her alien features. I want to make you an offer. Not as a slave to a master, but as one warrior to another. The audience hall fell silent except for the distant hum of the Colosseum's systems. Marcus could feel the weight of history pressing down on this moment, the sense that whatever happened next would change everything. I am offering you freedom, the Empress said. Not just for yourself, but for your entire species. Earth will be granted autonomous status within the Empire, your people will be allowed to govern themselves, and all human slaves will be released. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it definitely was. In exchange for what? Marcus asked. Your service, Vexaria replied. I want you to become my champion, to fight not as a slave in the arena but as my personal representative in matters that require unconventional solutions. You would have access to the finest training, the best equipment, and resources beyond your current imagination. Marcus stared at her, trying to process the magnitude of what she was offering. Freedom for his entire species in exchange for his personal service to the being who had enslaved them in the first place. There are other empires beyond our borders, Vexaria continued. Powers that threaten the stability I have built over the centuries. I need someone who can face impossible odds and find ways to win anyway. Someone who doesn't break when they're supposed to break. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then, you return to your cell, and eventually you die in the arena like every other slave. Your species remains in bondage, and I find other ways to deal with my enemies. Marcus looked around the vast audience hall, taking in the displays of conquered civilizations, the casual demonstration of power that surrounded him. He thought about his fellow humans in slave camps across the galaxy, about the billions still trapped on Earth under Zephyrian occupation. You're asking me to betray my own species, he said. I'm asking you to save them, Vexaria countered. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Marcus Chen. There are things out there that make the Zephyrian Empire look benevolent by comparison. Your people can spend the next 1,000 years as my slaves, or they can spend them as my allies. The choice is yours. She stood again, her imposing figure casting long shadows across the mirror floor. But, understand this, I am not making this offer because I am merciful. I am making it because I am practical. Humans are more valuable as willing servants than as reluctant slaves. Marcus felt the weight of every human life pressing down on his shoulders. Billions of people, their futures hanging on his decision in this moment. It was an impossible choice, but, then, again, humans specialized in impossible choices. What guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word? None, Vexaria said bluntly. Except for this, I am 1,000 years old, and I did not build this empire by breaking promises carelessly. My word, once given, is absolute. She extended one of her 4 hands toward him, a gesture that seemed oddly formal in the alien setting. What is your answer, Marcus Chen? Will you be my champion, and, in doing so, secure freedom for your species? Or will you choose pride over pragmatism and condemn them to eternal servitude? Marcus stared at her extended hand, knowing that everything hinged on this moment. Whatever choice he made would echo through history, affecting not just his own fate but the fate of every human being in the galaxy. He thought about his fellow slaves, about the friends he had lost in the gladiatorial pits, about the home he might never see again. He thought about the impossible victory he had won in the arena, and about the strange path that had led him to this moment. Then, he thought about what it meant to be human, to face the impossible and find a way forward anyway. Slowly, he reached out and took the Empress's hand. Her skin was warm despite its chitinous appearance, and her grip was surprisingly gentle. I accept, he said, the words feeling both like a victory and a betrayal. But, I have conditions. Vexaria's mandibles clicked again, the sound definitely amused this time. Of course you do. Very well, Marcus Chen. Let us negotiate the terms of your service. As they began to discuss the details of his new role, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped onto a path that would lead him far from anything he had ever imagined. He had saved his species, but, in doing so, he had bound himself to the very power that had enslaved them. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous choice a human could make was the one that seemed like surrender. 6 months had passed since Marcus Chen became the personal champion of Empress Vexaria, and the galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's place in the cosmic order had fundamentally changed. The news of Earth's autonomous status had spread through the trade routes and communication networks, sparking everything from celebration to outrage depending on who was listening. Marcus stood in his private quarters aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge, reviewing intelligence reports about their next assignment. The quarters themselves were a testament to how dramatically his circumstances had changed. They were larger than the entire slave barracks he had once called home, furnished with technology that would have seemed like magic to his former self, and equipped with training facilities that could simulate combat scenarios from across the galaxy. But luxury hadn't made him soft. If anything, the responsibilities of his new position had pushed him to become stronger, faster, and more dangerous than he had ever been as a simple maintenance engineer. The Empress had kept her word about providing the finest training available, and Marcus had discovered that humans had an almost unlimited capacity for improvement when properly motivated. A chime indicated someone was requesting entry, and Marcus looked up to see Coordinator Vextan appearing on his communication screen. The Zephyrian advisor had become something like a liaison between Marcus and the Empress, handling the details of his missions while she focused on the broader strategic picture. Champion, Vextan said, using the formal title that still felt strange to Marcus's ears. Her Majesty requests your presence in the strategy chamber. We have received disturbing intelligence from the frontier territories. Marcus sealed his reports and made his way through the flagship's corridors. The Dominion's Edge was one of the most advanced vessels in the Zephyrian fleet, a mobile command center that could coordinate operations across multiple star systems. Its crew of several thousand beings represented dozens of species, all working together in the complex machinery of Imperial administration. The strategy chamber was located at the heart of the ship, a spherical room where holographic displays could create three-dimensional maps of entire galactic sectors. As Marcus entered, he saw Empress Vexaria standing at the center of the chamber, her forearms manipulating multiple data streams simultaneously while her compound eyes tracked information that would have overwhelmed most organic minds. "Ah, Marcus," she said without turning around. "Perfect timing. We have a situation that requires your particular talents." The holographic display shifted, showing a star system Marcus didn't recognize. 3 planets orbited a yellow star, but it was immediately clear that something was wrong. The worlds themselves were dark, their surfaces covered by what looked like geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe even as he watched. "The Kethvar Collective," Vexaria explained, finally, turning to face him. "A machine intelligence that has been dormant for over 50,000 years. 3 weeks ago, it awakened and began consuming everything in its path." More information flowed into the display: casualty reports, fleet positions, desperate communications from colonial worlds that had gone silent one by one. The scale of destruction was staggering. "How many dead?" Marcus asked. 15 billion and counting, Vexaria replied with the cold precision that had made her such an effective ruler. "The collective doesn't just kill its victims, it converts them, turns their biological and technological resources into extensions of itself. Every planet it takes makes it stronger." Marcus studied the tactical displays, noting the positions of Zephyrian fleets and the defensive lines they had established. It was clear that the Empire's forces were being systematically outmaneuvered by an enemy that fought faster than organic minds could react. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Direct action," the Empress said. "My fleets can slow the collective's advance, but they cannot stop it. Conventional warfare is ineffective against an enemy that can process thousands of tactical scenarios simultaneously and adapt in real time." She manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on one particular world that still showed signs of active resistance. "This is Zirian Prime, the last major population center in the affected region. The collective has partially overrun the planet, but there are still isolated pockets of survivors holding defensive positions. Intelligence suggests that the collective's local command node is located in the planetary capital." Marcus began to see where this was leading. "You want me to infiltrate an occupied world and somehow destroy a machine intelligence that's already absorbed most of the planetary infrastructure?" "Precisely," Vexaria said with what might have been satisfaction. "An impossible mission requiring someone who specializes in achieving the impossible." The details of the plan were as audacious as Marcus had expected. He would be inserted onto Zirian Prime via stealth pod, make contact with the remaining resistance forces, and then infiltrate the capital city to locate and destroy the collective's command node. The mission had approximately a 3% chance of success according to the strategic computer's odds that would have made any rational commander abandon the operation immediately. But Marcus was beginning to understand something about his new role as the Empress's champion. He wasn't just a warrior or a special operative. He was a weapon designed to be used when conventional solutions failed, when the Empire needed someone who could find victory in situations where victory shouldn't be possible. The journey to Zirian Prime took 3 days, during which Marcus prepared himself mentally and physically for what lay ahead. His equipment had been customized for this mission: armor that could adapt to multiple environments, weapons that could function even in the electromagnetic chaos of a partially converted world, and communication devices that could maintain contact with the fleet even through the collective's interference. But the most important preparation was psychological. Marcus had learned that fighting impossible odds required a particular mindset, a willingness to discard conventional tactical thinking and embrace solutions that seemed irrational to more logical minds. It was a uniquely human approach to problem solving, and it was exactly why the Empress had chosen him for this role. The stealth pod entered Zirian Prime's atmosphere under cover of a debris field from destroyed orbital facilities. As Marcus piloted the small craft toward the surface, he could see the extent of the collective's influence firsthand. Vast geometric structures had sprouted from the planet's surface like crystalline growths, connected by streams of energy that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. In the distance, he could see what had once been cities, now transformed into nightmarish hybrid constructions of organic and mechanical components. He landed in a mountainous region that the collective hadn't yet fully processed, following intelligence reports that suggested this was where the last major resistance group had established their base. The pod's sensors detected multiple life forms moving through the rocky terrain, survivors, trying to stay ahead of the machine intelligence's relentless advance. Marcus gathered his equipment and activated his suit's camouflage systems before leaving the pod. The air outside was thick with microscopic machines, nanobots that the collective used to analyze and convert raw materials. His armor's filters would protect him for now, but he knew that prolonged exposure would eventually overwhelm even the most advanced protective systems. Finding the resistance base took 6 hours of careful movement through terrain that shifted between natural rock formations and the collective's geometric additions. The boundary between converted and unconverted territory wasn't a clean line, it was a chaotic mixture of organic and artificial elements that seemed to change according to some incomprehensible logic. The resistance fighters found him before he found them, emerging from concealed positions with weapons trained on his position. They were a mixture of species, humans, Zephyrians, and several others that Marcus didn't immediately recognize. All of them had the hollow-eyed look of beings who had seen too much death. Imperial forces, their leader asked in accented standard. She was human, Marcus realized with surprise, a woman in her 40s whose face bore the marks of combat and loss. Champion Marcus Chen, he replied, using the identification code that Vextan had provided. I'm here to coordinate a strike against the command node. The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to something that might have been hope. I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, formerly of the Zirian Defense Force. What's left of it, anyway? She led him to their base, a heavily fortified cave complex that had been reinforced with salvaged military equipment. Inside, Marcus found approximately 200 survivors, including civilians who had been unable to evacuate before the collective's attack began. 3 weeks ago, we had a planetary defense force of 50,000, Martinez explained as she briefed him on the tactical situation. The collective hit us simultaneously across 12 major cities. By the end of the first day, 80% of our forces were either dead or converted. She activated a tactical display showing the capital city's current configuration. The collective had transformed it into something that barely resembled its original structure, a maze of interconnected nodes and processing centers that extended both above and below ground. The command node is here, Martinez pointed to a massive structure at the city's center. It's heavily defended by converted military units and collective constructs. Every attempt to approach it has ended in complete failure. Marcus studied the display, noting the defensive positions and patrol patterns. The collective had arranged its defenses with mathematical precision, creating overlapping fields of fire and surveillance that would detect and eliminate any conventional assault force. How many people do you have who can still fight? He asked. 40, maybe 50 if we count the walking wounded, Martinez replied. But they're brave as hell and they know this terrain better than anyone. Good, Marcus said. Because I'm going to need a distraction. The plan he outlined over the next several hours was exactly the kind of desperate gambit that had become his signature approach to impossible situations. The resistance fighters would launch coordinated attacks on 3 separate collective facilities, drawing the machine intelligence's attention and forcing it to redeploy its defensive forces. Meanwhile, Marcus would infiltrate the command node through a route that every logical analysis indicated was suicide. You're talking about going through the conversion chambers, Martinez said when she understood his proposal. Those places are designed to break down organic matter and rebuild it according to collective specifications. Nothing biological can survive in there. Nothing biological has ever had a reason to try surviving in there, Marcus corrected. The collective's defenses are designed to stop armies, not individuals. It won't expect someone to deliberately enter the most dangerous part of its facility. The resistance fighters spent the night preparing for what they all knew might be their final battle. Marcus used the time to make final adjustments to his equipment and to mentally prepare himself for the challenges ahead. He had learned that success in impossible situations often came down to psychological factors as much as tactical ones, the ability to keep functioning when every rational instinct screamed for retreat. As dawn broke over Zirian Prime's transformed landscape, the resistance fighters moved out to their assigned positions. Marcus watched them go, these brave beings who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the slim chance that his plan might work. Their courage reminded him why he had accepted the Empress's bargain in the first place, not for personal glory, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The journey to the capital took most of the day, moving carefully through territory that was increasingly dominated by the collective's influence. Marcus's armor adapted continuously to the changing environment, its systems working overtime to protect him from the various hazards that the machine intelligence used to discourage organic intrusion. As evening approached, he reached the outer perimeter of the capital city. The transformation was complete here. Every structure had been rebuilt according to the collective's geometric preferences, creating an urban landscape that was beautiful and terrifying in its alien perfection. Energy flowed through the buildings like blood through arteries, and Marcus could see converted beings moving through the streets with the mechanical precision of living machines. The first phase of the plan began at precisely 2100 hours. Explosions erupted across 3 different sectors as the resistance fighters launched their diversionary attacks. Marcus watched through his armor's sensors as collective forces responded exactly as he had predicted, redeploying defensive units to counter the perceived threats. While the machine intelligence focused on the resistance fighters, Marcus began his infiltration of the command node. The route he had chosen led through the conversion chambers, vast facilities where the collective processed organic matter and rebuilt it according to its specifications. These areas were lightly guarded because no sane being would voluntarily enter them. Which was exactly why Marcus's plan might work. The conversion chambers were a nightmare of organic and mechanical fusion. Walls pulsed with what had once been living tissue, now serving as components in the collective's processing systems. The air itself was thick with transformative agents that would have killed an unprotected being in seconds. Marcus's armor held, but he could feel it struggling against the environmental hazards. Warning indicators flashed continuously as his suit systems filtered out toxins, neutralized corrosive agents, and provided breathable atmosphere in conditions that were fundamentally hostile to organic life. He moved through the chambers like a ghost, using routes that no rational defender would think to guard. The collective's attention was focused on the external attacks, and its internal sensors were designed to detect larger intrusions than a single infiltrator. After 2 hours of careful movement, Marcus reached the core of the command node. It was a spherical chamber 50 meters in diameter, filled with processing banks and data streams that represented the collective's local consciousness. At the center of the sphere, suspended in a web of energy conduits, was the primary processing core, a crystalline structure that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. This was where the plan became truly desperate. Marcus had brought with him a device that the Empress's technicians had designed specifically for this mission, a virus program that could theoretically disrupt the collective's information processing systems. But delivering it required direct physical contact with the processing core, which meant exposing himself to the full attention of an intelligence that could think thousands of times faster than any organic mind. As Marcus approached the core, he could feel the collective becoming aware of his presence. The chamber's defensive systems activated, filling the air with energy weapons and mechanical guardians that materialized from hidden alcoves. But these were exactly the kinds of conventional defenses that Marcus had learned to overcome during his training as the Empress's champion. He moved through the defensive fire with inhuman grace, his enhanced reflexes and tactical training allowing him to find paths through seemingly impenetrable barriers. Every shot that missed him was a victory, every second he remained alive brought him closer to his objective. The collective tried to communicate with him as he approached the core, its voice filling his mind with offers and threats in equal measure. It promised him power, immortality, the chance to become part of something greater than humanity. When that failed, it showed him images of what would happen to the resistance fighters, to the billions of beings still unconverted in the galaxy, if he succeeded in destroying this node. But Marcus had learned something important during his months as the Empress's champion. Sometimes the most human thing you could do was ignore the logical arguments and follow your instincts instead. And every instinct he had told him that the collective represented something fundamentally opposed to the chaotic, unpredictable nature of organic life. He reached the processing core just as his armor's systems began to fail. The virus device locked onto the crystalline structure with mechanical precision, and Marcus triggered the upload sequence as energy bolts and physical projectiles filled the air around him. The collective screamed as the virus program spread through its systems, a sound that seemed to come from every surface in the chamber simultaneously. Its defenses became erratic, confused, as core processing functions began to shut down in cascade failure.
Marcus felt something strike him in the chest, a projectile that his failing armor couldn't deflect.
He fell backward, his vision blurring as his suit's medical systems tried to keep him conscious. Through the haze of approaching unconsciousness, he could see the processing core beginning to crack, its crystalline structure fracturing as the virus program did its work. The last thing he remembered was the sound of the collective's death cry echoing through the chamber, and the distant rumble of structures collapsing as the machine intelligence lost its grip on the planet's infrastructure. Marcus woke up 3 days later in a medical facility aboard the Dominion's Edge. The first face he saw was Empress Vexaria herself, sitting beside his recovery pod with an expression that seemed almost concerned. "You succeeded," she said without preamble. "The collective's advance has been halted, and its remaining nodes are being systematically eliminated by my fleets." Marcus tried to sit up, wincing as his injuries made themselves known. The survivors? Colonel Martinez and most of her people were successfully evacuated. The civilian population of the unconverted territories has been relocated to safer systems. The Empress paused. "Your actions saved approximately 2 billion lives, Marcus Chen." As his recovery continued, Marcus learned the full scope of what his mission had accomplished. The destruction of the command node hadn't just freed Zirian Prime, it had disrupted the collective's entire network, creating opportunities for the Imperial fleets to strike at the machine intelligence's other installations. Within a week, the crisis that had threatened entire sectors of the galaxy was effectively over. But, more importantly, word of the mission had spread throughout the Empire. The story of a human champion who had achieved the impossible against the collective became a symbol of hope for countless beings who had begun to lose faith in the face of seemingly unstoppable threats. Marcus realized that his role as the Empress's champion was about more than just completing dangerous missions. He had become a symbol of human potential, a demonstration that organic life could find ways to triumph over even the most logical and overwhelming opposition. As he stood on the observation deck of the Dominion's Edge, watching the stars whirl past in hyperspace, Marcus reflected on the path that had brought him to this point. He had started as a simple maintenance engineer, become a slave, survived impossible odds in the gladiatorial arena, and now served as the personal champion of the most powerful being in known space. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that conventional military forces couldn't handle. But humans had always specialized in finding unconventional solutions, in refusing to accept that defeat was inevitable even when every logical analysis suggested otherwise. And now, for the first time in his species' history, those uniquely human qualities were being used not just for survival, but to protect and defend others across the stars. It wasn't the future that Marcus had imagined for himself or his species, but, as he watched distant stars streak past the viewport, he found himself thinking that it might just be the future they deserved. The galaxy had learned something important about humanity through Marcus Chen's actions. They were more than just another conquered species, more than entertainment in alien arenas. They were a force for change in a universe that had become too comfortable with the status quo. And, sometimes, the most revolutionary thing you could do was refuse to break when everyone expected you to break.